Hi everyone, my name is Randy. Welcome to Columbia State Historic Park. Thank you for joining us today from wherever you are. Feel free during this presentation to tell us in the comments where you're joining us from. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about miners. We're going to be examining how miners lived during the gold rush. So the gold rush began in about 1848, and it led to the migration of hundreds of thousands of people from countries all around the world to come to this region in California where I am. So I'm standing at Columbia State Historic Park. It's located in what we know as gold country. So this is a region in the Sierra Nevada mountains where most of the gold is concentrated. So this is where people flooded into for the gold rush. And today we're going to be examining the lives of miners, how they worked and how they lived. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check out some tools. So go ahead and join me over here in this section. If you notice this little lot we have, you can see 4 posts and some rope. This area is roped off because it's about the size of a mining claim. So during the gold rush in very populated areas, miners would only have about a 10-foot by 10-foot area in which they could dig to look for gold. Now let's go and see some of the tools they would use. So obviously when we think of gold mining, we usually think of gold panning because gold panning was done in the early days of the gold rush. It's also one of the easier methods. It doesn't require a lot of tools or even a lot of hard work. Let's see what tools they would use for gold panning. So obviously they would use pans like this. They would take their dirt, scoop their dirt, scoop some water, and then they would begin to pan it. So I'll give you a demonstration. Over here in this bucket, I have some dirt. So put some dirt on my pan. Then the next ingredients you're gonna need is gonna be water. You can't gold pan without water. So also with this cup, I'm gonna scoop some water and pour the water on my pan. Now, if you look, you can see the dirty, muddy water and the gravel. With gold panning, you're gonna start swirling it. Now you don't want to swirl it too fast because if you have gold in the pan, in the dirt, it could potentially fly out of your pan. So you don't want to do that. Once you feel as though you've processed it enough, you're gonna take your pan, gently pour the water out, in the hope that little pieces of gold will remain behind. Now you don't want to pour it out too fast because those gold pieces could fall out and then you'd have to dig for them on the ground, try to look for them. In this one though, this pan only really has some rocks. You can imagine doing this hour after hour, day after day, pretty slow method. So there's also a different type of technique called the rocker box. This is a faster method to process gold. It was used during the California Gold Rush because it was used during the Georgia Gold Rush, which happened before the California Gold Rush. So it was invented for the California Gold Rush, and they brought it over because it's a faster method. So let's look at how this rocker box works. So you can see it's made out of wood. It has this handle. You can imagine what this handle will be for rocking it. At the very top of the rocker box, you can see this metal sheet with lots of little holes in it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take some dirt. So I'm gonna scoop some dirt right now. And I'm gonna put it on top of this metal sheet on top of the rocker box. See, one more scoop. All right, so there's my dirt. And then I'm gonna need water. So for this demonstration, a bucket of water right here. And I'm just gonna pour the water on top of the dirt. Now it's very important that while I'm pouring it, I also shake it. So let's see if I can do it. Normally this method would be done by at least 2 people. So I did as best as I could just by myself. You can see that a lot of the rocks get caught behind. It's the hope of the miner that little gold pieces will fall through the crack. It comes down here into this section of the box. From over here, you would take your pan and you would scoop up any dirt that was left behind, and then you would pan it and sift it some more. So this is a much faster method than just panning because you already separated the rocks. So that is the rocker box. Now let's go inside and look at how miners live. So right outside of this mining shack that you see before you, you can see this little table, and this table is filled with a variety of different types of food. So the food eaten by miners back then, since there was no electricity, no refrigeration, mostly be canned food, because it stays a lot longer. So right here we have a can of fresh tomatoes. There'd be things like fresh peaches, some oysters. They would have salt. So with meat, they would salt the meat so that the meat would last longer. It wouldn't go bad as quickly. They would have dried beans as well. Here's one of my favorite cans that we have. This is ox cheek soup. Pretty interesting. Not something I've ever heard of before. In this little container, we have some crackers. This is called hardtack. Hardtack was one of the cheaper items to buy back then. It doesn't have any real nutritious value, but it would fill up your stomach so that you're not hungry. Normally it goes stale pretty quickly, so you'd want to dip it in hot water or hot coffee so that it wouldn't chip your teeth as you're eating it. And then you can see the tin type of dishware, more durable, a bowl and a spoon. And then even just this table alone is made from an old crate, little wooden stool. Now let's go inside the house. So inside this shack, I kept most of the valuables because miners would want to keep their most valuable items locked up. They wouldn't want to keep it out and exposed. So some of those more expensive items would be things like boots. So boots during the gold rush could cost you upwards of $500. So a very expensive item that would have to be replaced pretty often just because of the conditions miners were working in. We also have things like a sack of potatoes. We have a rifle. Rifles would be used for protection, protecting your claim, your shack, your supplies from other miners, as well as for hunting. And over here, since I mentioned hunting, you can see this animal pelt could be used for warmth, blankets or clothing. And then we also have different types of tools in here. So tools during the gold rush were very expensive as well because all miners needed the same tools in order to extract gold. So we have tools like axes. So pickaxes during the gold rush, if boots could cost upwards of $500, pickaxes could cost upwards of $1,000. Also, shovels in order to dig with as well. And not every gold pan was how we imagine, like a flat gold pan. You would really use whatever you had. So even things more like buckets like this could also be panned with. And then clothing. So majority of the time, since miners are working outside, either in the cold or in the sun, they're gonna need a hat to wear. They would wear pretty loose clothing, like you can see this loose shirt right here. And then right in the back of this shack, we have the bed. Not a very glamorous bed. So it's held together. It's built out of wood. You can see the blankets were used for warmth. And then if I pick up the blankets and you take a close look, you can see rope. So the rope is supporting the bed. So if you can imagine miners after a very long day of mining, bent over, they have to come to their shack, go to bed, and they're laying on some rope. So pretty horrible back support, but it's pretty cheap. For lighting, we have a candle, one single candle, which would also be a big fire hazard. This candle would be used at night to write letters, to read with. And so even though this shack only has one bed, miners typically wouldn't live by themselves. So they might live in groups of 4 to 5. So if you didn't have a bed, probably just sleep on the floor, which in my belief would probably be more comfortable than the rope bed. Now let's go outside and see how they would cook their meals. All right, so since there wasn't a fireplace inside of that shack, out here we have a campfire. So you'd have a campfire right outside your shack. This is where you would eat your meals, do your cooking. You can see this little stool I have set up. So we have a canteen here that would be used to heat up the coffee, especially in the morning, so that you're not too cold, so you get a nice warm up before you prepare working for the day. In order to cook, you would have a frying pan. You can see this old rusted one. Place your piece of meat here, and then you'd cook it. Whoa! That can also happen to miners as well. Beans can fall on them. It's very dangerous. So they put their meat here, and then, let me fix this real quick. Nope, doesn't want to fix. I'm just gonna put that right there. Didn't happen. So you cook your meat, and you need to flip your meat over. So you can see this fork right here kind of almost looks like a pitchfork. You take your meat, you turn it over, flip it. That's how you cook it. And then you would eat your meat. You'd eat your beans. You'd eat your canned food. You can put it in a pan like this. Something else you can do with this pan, obviously gold pan with it. So after you're gold panning for the day, you rinse it out, and then you'd eat your meal out of it. Just like that. So not a very glamorous eating situation. You can see the camp tried to kill me, so you can imagine how difficult it was for miners back then. Now let's go ahead and head up the street a little bit, and we're gonna look at one more mining camp, or a mining shack. All right, so as we're walking into the edge of Colombia, I would like you to take a look behind you. So as you get a view of the shack that we just left, you can see that this area is below street level. So it's all below street level. And that's because during the gold rush, there used to be a building here, but the building was torn down, and then miners mined the site where we were just standing. So there's no buildings left on this site today, but it used to have buildings on it. So unfortunately, were torn down in order to mine underneath. So let's continue our journey. So right now I'm standing at the very edge of town. If you notice, you can see town over on this side. You flip to the other side, you can see this open space area where there's a lot of plants and really no buildings. And that's because this area over here was once the biggest mining pit in Colombia. So I'll put a picture in the comments after this live stream to give you an idea of what this big giant mining pit looked like. It's pretty amazing when you see the before picture. So let's go into this mining pit. So in the pit today, you can see a lot of trees, a lot of grass, a lot of plants. It looks virtually nothing like it did during the gold rush. So since the gold rush had 170 years, it's changed a lot. And so we've had a lot of wildlife grow back, but this entire area looks completely different. It was completely destroyed by miners as they were looking for gold. Now, there are a lot of reminders left in this pit since all the wildlife has grown back to remind you of just how desperate miners were for gold. But we do have these huge boulders all throughout Colombia, all throughout this area. These boulders were uncovered during the gold rush by miners using pickaxes and shovels as they were looking for gold. Because if you can get a look at these rocks again, you can see There's even some like markings on where the pickaxes and the shovels carved away and chipped away at the rock. So let's go inside this other mining shack. This one looks much different than the first one. It has some different features to it. All right. So in this shack, you can see it has bunk beds. Because as I mentioned, most of the time miners would live in groups with other people. It was just safer that way. And you also would want to help each other. More dangerous to live alone. For warmth, instead of the campfire, this one has a fireplace in the center of it. So you can see this fireplace, you can see some of the items that would be used for cooking. So big sack of flour, we have some bowls, we have a big pot, there's a frying pan. Up at the top of it, we have some canned beans as well, different canisters. So this is the second mining shack. Go ahead and tell me in the comments, students, which shack would you rather have? Would you rather have the first mining shack or the one I'm standing in right now, the second mining shack? Let me know which one you'd rather have. Tell me why you chose that shack as well. All right, we're gonna end the tour today by looking at these rocks really quickly. So, you notice over here, it's like a maze of rocks. So if you can imagine these rocks being completely covered in dirt and then being dug out because there was gold trapped amongst these boulders that the miners were after. These rocks go hundreds of feet deeper, and then over time, in the over 100 years since the gold rush, the mining pit was buried up just because the mining operation stopped. So that's my tour today of the mining shack and life of miners back then. I'm gonna post in the comments a picture of what this area used to look like so you have some idea of what it was like during the gold rush. I wanna thank everyone for joining me today. Also, don't forget, join me tomorrow, same place, same time, at 10 a.m. See you then. Bye everyone from Columbia.